Welcome back to Insight Club. Today we're talking about assumptions and unhappiness, so stick around for this conversation. The first rule of Insight Club is you don't talk about Insight Club. You do Insight Club. The second rule of Insight Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Insight Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Insight Club.
Welcome back. And where is your mind, Megan?
Well, as always, some new part of the introduction hits me each time. And this time it was insights that incite you to action. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm very good at having insights. And yet I'm not sure I'm always doing that second part. In fact, I know that's where I struggle, is being incited into action. And we were just talking before we started recording about being in this space where you come into awareness that the path you're on is no longer serving you. And it's an internal awareness. It's not somebody else saying, oh, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. It's a genuine internal awareness that's like, oh, I'm ready for a shift. And at the same time, you're like, no. And I was sharing, like, one of my favorite examples of this is the, I don't remember what century he lived in, but Saint Augustine. And he's like living this decadent lifestyle and he's unhappy and he feels like it's separating him from God. And he makes this prayer. He's like, dear God, please make me chaste and make me live a good life, but not yet. Because he's like, I know I'm on this path that's not making me happy, but I really still want to keep partying and, like, having lavish dinners and drinking all of the wine. And I relate to that so much. The feeling of, I want to shift. I can feel that what I'm doing isn't serving me and isn't serving my higher purpose. But, like, man, I'm enjoying this ice cream.
And I was so delighted when you shared this because I felt like I had this just recently with a pattern that I could recognize in relationships where I was feeling like, people are against me and threatened and so on. And I could notice that, probably most of this is my assumption and it's just my mind creating a story over something that it's not exactly true. If I could, like, look at the whole thing, I could see that, yeah, this doesn't really sound like the whole story. Like, it's just black and white. And I could recognize that there was a trigger, there was something coming from a trauma, but yet I wasn't completely ready to just release and let go the thought at the moment. And I found it was so similar to when I was letting go from sugar and gluten and so on, where I was having the same thing. Like, I'm letting go of this, but then I would, there's a dessert today, I'm gonna eat this. And then I was eating that and I was like, actually, this is not being good to me. I'm not even really enjoying this that much anymore. And yet, this is the last time. I'm still savoring this for now, and I'm gonna change in a moment. So it's like those moments of awareness where we can notice and still not be ready to shift, but not shame ourselves for that, being ready to know that, oh, this is a point where I can turn things, where I'm aware enough to start making a change.
Yeah, that piece about not shaming ourselves feels like the most
Yeah.
important part, because it really feels like it's a small child part of me. I've had this experience a lot with anger. I guess anger is just one of my biggest teachers this this lifetime, this time around. So I've had times where the anger has subsided enough so I'm I've dropped some of the assumptions, because a big trigger for me coming into anger is the assumptions. And, that's our main topic today, is assumptions and unhappiness, right? So that's a big trigger for me, is like, something happens, I have an assumption and I make a projection. This person is not respecting me. They're trying to hurt me. They're persecuting me. My victim energy just, flares up, like it's some kind of inflammation.
Yeah.
And then when I calm down, I guess it's like coming out of my parasympathetic, or coming out of my sympathetic nervous system into my parasympathetic nervous system, I can be in that place where I'm like, oh, yep, I realize my assumptions are not based in reality, but I'm not ready to stop being angry. And it feels almost, in a weird way, nurturing. Like, as long as I'm not acting on the anger and I'm not acting on those wrong assumptions, um, or I'll say like extreme assumptions, right? Like, it's a pretty extreme assumption to be like, this person who has never even met me, like, has a vendetta against me, and that's why they cut me off on the road,
Yeah,
right?
they're trying to hurt me. That's the thing, that's the kind of assumption that I feel like it's most hurtful for me as well, is that they're
Yeah,
trying to hurt me.
they're trying to hurt me. So then there's like this space that's created where I can say like, oh, little Megan, you still want some time to just kind of shake out those feelings and not come back to the world yet, and be in a little bit of a timeout. Like, yeah, you can do that. So I like acknowledging, I'm not done being angry. Like, I still kind of want to be in a poopy mood. I'm going to not take it out on anybody, but I kind of want to be in a poopy mood, and not shaming myself for that. That, oh my goodness, that's been such a catalyst for growth. And then my experience is, I'm going to fully come back to feeling better and wanting to contribute and wanting to be my best self when there's time. It's like letting the swelling come down naturally, instead of, I don't know, puncturing it and forcing it and trying to get all, like, squeeze all the anger out. And then the skin becomes more inflamed.
Yeah, letting the whole wave pass instead of trying to block it with a barricade or something, because it doesn't work really like that. I
Yeah.
feel like it's such a big thing in being able to let go and release, to allow ourselves to hold it tight enough that, okay, now I can let go. And it's such a an example of this when we do, for example, the fist of anger in Kundalini yoga. You need to hold the anger, you need to hold the thing that is making you pissed off, before you just release and let go when you feel lighter from it.
Yeah. And to move with strength, right? That's a big part of
Yes.
that. Kriya is like, that's one of the things I'll often get angry about during Fists of Anger. I'm like, why am I so out of shape? Why is this so hard? I should be stronger. I should
Why am
have
I
more.
even doing this?
Yeah, I get angry at the Kriya that keeps the anger going.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to kind of come back to the larger topic, assumptions and unhappiness. A few days ago, thinking about, coming to record this episode, I was asking myself, how have my assumptions been making me unhappy?
Yeah.
Because we keep examining assumptions. And I it was exactly this, it was these small moments, and my moments were truly small, because it was like being on customer support a for a software service. And I had two conversations with two different support people. And in the first one, somehow we had a miscommunication where, like, they were telling me, this is not my account, or I can't access the account somehow. And I made all of these assumptions that were like, well, that means this person, is at fault, and and I transferred all of the frustration at the thing not working to ill intent for me, like the customer service agent is tricking me and it's like it's not the right company. And anyway, so it just spiraled into all of these assumptions that made me incredibly unhappy
Mm.
and also incredibly ineffective at solving the problem. And when I called back again and spoke with somebody different, I decided to trust that this person had my best interest at heart, to the extent that I was like, I wonder, is this a problem with my computer? Like, could it be that I'm, that it's on my end? And she walked me through and we got to the, what was wrong. But making the assumption that she wanted to help me, had my best interest in mind, even though she doesn't know me, she's, living in a different continent, allowed me to actually troubleshoot to the real problem, because it
Mm.
wasn't a problem with my computer. But what turned out was happening was I couldn't access the site because I'm using a VPN. But I've been using this site for, a long time, and it's a recent change in their policy on my end, I was like, well, nothing changed and the site won't work. And on their end, they changed their security measures. So that information couldn't have come through if I stayed on the assumption, like, you guys are screwing me. You're doing something wrong. It's a problem on your end. You want to, like, you want to make life hard for me. And I just really
Mm.
took that away as, it makes such a massive, and at the end of the call, I was just so connected to this woman in Sri Lanka. I was like, thank you. I'm really grateful. um,
Oh,
but just feeling there's such a practical difference in whether we can do things in the world based on our assumptions.
yeah. I was thinking as you were saying this, what are we trading for the happiness? Because we wouldn't have a behavior that would just make us unhappy because we want to be unhappy, right? There's something that we're trading. Often it might be that we want to be right. It might be that there's some kind of energy that we get from being angry or from being whatever is the emotion that comes with it. But yeah, what are the things that you can find that you are trading for the happiness?
Oh, what a great question. Well, the story actually starts a little bit earlier, where when my bookkeeping software wasn't working, my first assumption was, it is my fault. It is my fault, right? And I thought, like, oh, there's something I don't understand and I'm not doing it. And that felt uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
so then I switched it to the assumption is, like, not only is it somebody else's fault, but they're like, the first miscommunication, right? Where they were like, we can't find your email connected with this account,
Oh,
and then I switched the assumption to, like, you're wrong. You're trying to hurt me. You're trying to trick me. Even though I
basically,
called you for customer support, you're just like somebody who's trying to steal my information.
so basically, you were in doubt. You traded that for the certainty that would make you unhappy, but then you don't have the doubt anymore. You're certain that they were the
Yes,
problem.
and also the discomfort, because the assumption that I'm doing something wrong is a really entrenched pattern for me. And so as I found myself in that energy of I'm doing something wrong, I was like, man, it sucks to always be the person who's wrong. I really hate this feeling. I don't want this feeling of being the person who can't figure out technology. But like, there's all this baggage that comes with it. The person who can't figure out technology, who, like, what am I doing running a business when I don't even understand how
Yeah,
QuickBooks works? It's like all these, a cascade of feelings of unworthiness hit me.
yeah.
And so I was like, well, no, thank you. May I please exchange this unworthiness for a hefty dose of anger and self-righteousness?
Whew. Yes. I can so relate, and this was so enlightening to like look at your version of it to be able to identify mine. Really, it's so much easier for us to understand when we're looking from a different story, right? I was like, oh yeah, actually, it is the same pattern because what I was feeling was doubt and questioning and uncertainty. And it felt much easier to have the certainty that, oh yeah, they're trying to hurt me. There must be it. I need to like have my space and so on. And then, yeah, it is unhappy, but you feel more grounded in anger than you feel in doubt. It puts you in motion, right? When we're talking about energy, the doubt, shame, unworthiness, all those feelings that we have when we're feeling like there's something wrong that I can't really grasp, uh, put our energy down. But anger, even though it's bad, it is more active. It puts us in motion. Even like we talked a few times, like how many things we accomplish when we're in anger. Like, see, you're gonna see what I can do now.
Well, I have to tell you, I was having this problem for like 2 or 3 weeks where I couldn't get into I couldn't get into my bookkeeping, and it was the anger that finally catapulted me into like beep, boop, boop, beep, beep, beep. What's wrong with you? You know.
Hmm.
So it did serve that purpose, and
Yeah.
it served that purpose up to a point, and then I hit a wall because I
Mm.
was unwilling to, if you have a technology problem, you have to troubleshoot. You have to be willing to say, here are all the things that could possibly be, and it, at best is tedious, and at worst for me is very triggering, right? Because one of the questions is like, is it on your end, which I always interpret as it's somehow my fault, right?
Yeah.
So actually, that's interesting for me to just kind of note that when things go wrong with technology, it's very triggering for me. I have a lot of stories that I'm bad at technology. Those have been, with me for a long time, and it feels like a big deal. It feels like there's something really wrong with me because I can't figure out how how electronics work. And and so the act of okay, let me trace it back. So anger was great for getting the process started, but it quickly became too blunt a tool because then what was required was relaxing and truly being honest and going, okay, could it be this? What's this? Let's try. Can you access it on your phone? Yes, I can. Okay, so that narrows it down. Um, and that is, anger is not a friend to the openness of really looking at all of the possibilities. And there have been so many times when I'm in anger and somebody will, with love, try to help me solve the problem. And I'm just lying, right? Well, wait, could you possibly do this? No, no, I
Want to.
don't have a pair of scissors. I couldn't possibly do that. I'm just straight up lying because and it becomes comical. Like this happens a lot with Grady, where he's like trying to help me solve a problem, and I'm in that space of I'm not ready to stop being angry, but I haven't yet
Not yet.
moved. I haven't yet moved out of the heat of the moment. So
Yeah.
I'm still in the like I I still want to be angry and I still want to project the anger
Mm.
about it, but that it's like there's this magic moment where the softening can happen.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you get out of your situation of feeling like how did you talk yourself down or naturally release the feeling of like these people are trying to hurt me?
Well, for me, it was two things. I have a big story with people using what I say against me and not being comfortable being vulnerable. And as you know, I worked through that quite a lot. and being able to be as vulnerable as I am in my business and in what I created today is already an advance. But when I get close to people, I still have moments where things are going to be triggered. And part of it was actually re-examining the history to actually see like, oh, okay, this is not the thing that happens all the time. Other people have their triggers as well. I haven't been my best in some moments as well. The other part was actually being honest and saying what I was feeling that was happening, and allowing the other person to tell me their perspective, even though I knew that like probably most of this is bullshit from my mind, but I need to to put it out in reality, and having a response that wasn't like you're crazy, but like, yeah, probably this is from your mind because I would never do this and so on, was something that calmed me down already, but I was still not ready to
Yeah.
release. And that came with like somatics, a lot of yoga.
Mm.
And after that, like really, it was a moment of like asking God, I'm leaving this in your hands. You deal with this for me. Help me stop having these negative thoughts because I'm tired of them. I'm done. I'm no longer subscribing to it. And then I got a sign pretty clear. Like literally a message came through a video that I wasn't even expecting. And I can't remember exactly the words now, but it was something with um yeah, let me try to remember. Um don't be afraid, I'm with you. That was the phrase. And that wasn't right after I asked that.
Mm.
And I was like, a huge bag came out of my shoulders, and I could feel like I was so much lighter after that.
Mm.
And the next moment, it felt like it didn't even happen. It was really like freeing to feel that.
Ah. How powerful to name your own experience so that you don't get caught in this thing that happens to us where our assumptions escalate and bounce off one another. Like, oh, I'm making this assumption, and so I'm acting this certain way, and then the other person's making an assumption, so they're acting, and then we get to it's like an arms race. It's like a cold war, right? And then we get to the brink of, nuclear extinction, and it's all because like, oh, you moved your hand and I thought you were moving it to press the button on your nuclear warheads, but you were actually reaching for a pen, you know?
Yes.
So to just say, I don't really think this is what you're doing, but this is what I'm swimming through in my brain right now. A really good friend of mine says that she and her partner started doing this thing where when they get triggered, they'll be like, little me right now is feeling like, and they'll express it in the like, like little Megan right now is feeling like nobody likes me and wants to be my friend, and let it have like a kind of silly voice. And then the other person gets to hear it with compassion and acknowledge, like, oh, okay, yep, I know you. I know that, can be a trigger for you. Um, it's kind of like, when I when I tell my husband, I'm like, oh, my period's here this week, and he's like, okay, cool. And that means I'm gonna, give you some extra hugs and some foot rubs, and it's like I'm letting you know that I'm at the effect of something, as opposed to just being at the effect and then, treating you differently, and you're
Yeah.
making an assumption that, I'm a monster.
Mhm.
um, but like that's become so, with my cycle in particular, that's become so helpful and freeing. And that's not about an
Mm.
assumption, but it's like this is an internal change that you might not be aware of, right? It's not broadcast, but I'm feeling more tired, I'm feeling less capable of handling challenge or conflict or whatever it is, and more in need of support. So, and we do that when we tell people like, I'm tired or I'm sick or, I've had a tough week, whatever it is. um but to let the like I love that you just came out with, here's what's going on in my mind right now. And that the other person didn't say, you're crazy, you're making it up.
Yeah. It required that was even something that, even though it's hard, I felt like, oh yeah, I need to give myself a pat on the back for it, because at other times I would just leave the situation with the assumption, and like I don't have to deal with it anymore. Like I just can assume that they're the problem and I can leave and try to build something else. But I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can see the pattern.
Yes.
Human beings are complicated. No matter where I go, to which person I go, there will be moments where relationships are challenging. And it doesn't make sense to just be building and building and building again new relationships over and over again. And when we hit the block, then you just destroy everything you created,
Yeah.
because you can't have an honest, vulnerable conversation.
I think that's something else that we are getting out of making those assumptions. If we let the assumption ride, we never have to change because we're never wrong.
Yeah.
um there was this gal I used to know, and she got like fired from every job she ever had, like every job, and after not long periods of time, and everyone, she would come back and it'd be like, oh well, this is what was wrong with them and they didn't know what they were doing with this and this and this. And at a certain point you're like, there's one, I don't mean like one or two jobs, and I don't mean getting laid off in tough economic times. I mean like just getting straight up fired. And it's like 6, 7, 8 jobs, and you're like, there's a common denominator here, and it's you. Right. And I did not have the guts to say that I did not know this person that well. But it just stands out in my mind as like a really great example of, it is possible to go through life and just let those assumptions ride, right? Like
Yeah.
this, that person's wrong, that person's wrong, and that person's wrong. And I had this interesting conversation recently with some folks about how in popular culture, there's a lot of diagnosing people, right? That person's a narcissist. That
Yeah.
person is this. That person is this. And maybe that person is a narcissist. I don't know. But it's just become so common. You're like, it kind of seems statistically improbable that there's that many people walking around with these like really serious diagnoses. And but that assumption means I don't have to change. I don't have to apologize. I don't have to repair the relationship. I don't have to examine my assumptions. I don't have to be with the discomfort of acknowledging that I have a trigger. And instead, I can just label that person, well, they're just difficult. They're just, fill in whatever blank.
Yeah.
So I think that's another huge trade off. Or, that's a trait. That's what we're getting
Yes.
out of making assumptions.
We get to protect our ego,
Yeah.
because it hurts to acknowledge, oh yeah, I might be wrong about some things, and even to like expose ourselves in our not so best light, not the
Except
greatest light.
Yeah, except that is our best light. I mean, it's like that's the hero's journey,
Yeah.
right? So anytime I'm more wedded to my assumptions, that's I'm hearing the call of the mentor and I'm saying, nobody's home, wrong number, block.
And they're running away from the hero's journey and just being resistant. to the phases that are not most pleasant.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so wonderful to acknowledge that like part of that hero's journey is going to be like, okay, okay, Athena, I hear you calling. I saw you left a voicemail. I'm going to call you back, but just not right now. Like I'm going to go on my hero's journey, but I need like one more day to just kind of stew in my self pity.
Yeah. Make me holy, but just not yet.
Yeah. But it's like it's moving toward it and going, okay, there's something here. There's something here for me. But I'm not quite ready. But um I I want to live a self-examined life.
Yeah.
I want I want to know where I'm being ridiculous, but I don't want to know.
And I think it, since you brought up the diagnosis and so on, I think it must be said that if we are in danger or like suffering real abuse and so on, by all means I wouldn't say like, oh no, you need to examine your side. You have to examine your side, but be safe first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But I agree with you. There's too much diagnosis, and even if for whatever mental diagnosis, there's a spectrum to all of it. All of us have a little bit of any of the things that can be talked about everywhere. Like that's why there's so much of self-diagnose of what's the name? My God. The high
ADHD?
ADHD. That's I had the Portuguese
Oh.
term in my mind. I was like, no, wait, I need to mess the words. Anyway, to mix the letters. Yeah, ADHD and all of this. If you look at the symptoms, everyone will be able to see like, oh, but I have a little bit of this. I have a little bit of that. I am a little bit like this. There's a spectrum. It's not like that these labels actually exist. It's just a mix of patterns put together.
Yeah, it describes a cluster of symptoms. Yeah. Oh, I know. When I read Dr. Daniel Amen's book, The 7 Types of ADHD, I was like, I have every single one. The part of that was really beautiful. I mean, I ended up just in tears reading that book, thinking about like ways in which I shamed myself for not being able to do stuff and having some self-forgiveness, and also thinking about students I'd taught
Hmm.
and my heart breaking because I didn't know I didn't know enough to say or to ask, um, is this child coming up against I was just seeing like a behavior problem, right? I was just seeing like you're choosing not to behave. And I didn't know enough to ask, is this child coming up against the limit of their ability to, do what I'm asking or to be in this situation? And it was one of those times where I was like, oh, I wish I could go back and have more compassion and be more curious and let go of the assumptions, right? Oh my
Yeah.
God. The fertile space for creating assumptions being an elementary school classroom teacher, like, because it's like, I know I've got this curriculum to get through and these kids are not complying. They're obviously just being defiant. Like, what a fraught relationship. I actually think there's so much damage that's done because of the way we structure educational or like learning environments, with the teacher having an identity of like, I've got to be the person who makes sure that all of these little people do all of this stuff. and that everything feels like a reflection on us. Everything feels
Mhm.
like, I mean, maybe not for skilled teachers. There, there are some wonderful teachers out there who probably don't feel it this way. But man, like bringing unhealed trauma and triggers we're not aware of into a situation where we're meant to be teaching and leading others, like, oh man, that's a big old mess right there.
Yeah. And I know that's part of what made me be able to have self compassion
Mm,
this time as well, because I was thinking, ah, maybe we're always doing the best that we can with what we know at the moment. And I got to see that I was doing the best I could with the limit that I was having in my self regulation of my
mm.
emotions and my nervous system at that point.
Which is
So,
the Yeah, which is the perfect time to say to somebody like, "Hey, this is all I got."
yeah,
Like this is what's going on for me.
yeah. And even
Um,
admitting I know that I'm not in my best, I want
yeah.
to do better. I see that I have a pattern here. I see that I have a trigger, a trauma that is not released. And I'm asking for help to see in a different point of view.
Mm. Well, that's a powerful assumption. Like, I'm assuming people will help me if I ask for it.
Yes.
I mean, that's something I see in other people and I feel triggered by, I feel jealous of. I'm like, how can you go
Same.
through life assuming people are helpful and that they care about you?
Same. Ah, it's one of the hardest things for me, asking for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I see it in other people, like I'm so drawn to it. I'm like, "Oh, I aspire to do that." Like I want to do that. I also want to be around people who do that. I tend to really feel drawn to them. And at the same time, I'm like, "Who are you to assume the world
And,
is?"
and it's so funny because I am one of those people that, and I know you as well, that want to help people. I'm excited when someone wants my help because
Yeah.
I love problem solving. And this is one of the things as well that gets us stuck into the assumption that, oh, okay, there's a problem here. And then we focus on the problem instead of trying to find a solution because we are naturally problem solvers. So if there's a problem, it feels more safe as well because I have something to solve or something to work on. Um, but a mentor of mine said a while ago that don't you get happy when you get to support someone, to help someone? And I'm like, yes, I love it. So why don't you extend the same kindness to others to let them help you? And that really hit me. It was Uma,
Mm.
by the way.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Give them that opportunity to feel that good. I mean, maybe this gets at one of the core things about assumptions, but this may sound real wacky. I still have a hard time believing other people experience life internally the way I do.
Yeah, me too.
It's hard for me to get over the assumption that I'm the only real actor because I can only experience my internal life.
Yeah.
And I have to actively remind myself everybody else. I mean, I think it's possible I'm in a simulation, right? and,
Yes.
and nobody else is real. But uh, I have to constantly like come up against that assumption that everybody else is just reacting to me, which is a
Mm.
very I feel like that's a very early developmental way to be, right? This is how children are when they're like under 3 years old. They take everything very personally because they're at a stage of development where it's like I only know I'm real. Everything else is just kind of an object. And so why aren't these objects doing what I want? And then we somehow get it that other people are just as real as we are. But that, I mean, and I bring this up because that's what's behind my, like, my feeling, well, of course it's my job to help other people, but it's not their job to help me, because I'm
Mhm.
assuming I'm somehow like the center of the show. It's the Megan show,
Yes,
right? So of
you're
course,
steering the wheel.
like, in my world, that doesn't translate to I wanna take advantage of people. Like, we have this thing in my family, I've talked to other family members about this, and we all feel the same. We're like, I would rather have the aisle seat on an airplane and have everybody else climbing over me than me have to climb over other people to get up, right?
Yeah.
I would rather be the one who's inconvenienced than inconvenience other people. And there's something there about making the assumption that I'm the only one who is neurotic. So, nobody else cares about climbing over me. Of course they do.
Yes. And it's so interesting how actually you're right, and I think it's easy to say that uh we all experience our inner world differently. So of course there are people that are not going to experience the same way as you do or as I do and so on. And yet there's something that you brought here that I thought, this is actually a big thing that I've been debating as well, because when we get into all our self development and spirituality and so on, of course, we're going to get some duality in things that it's complicated to put it all together. And I have this thing like, oh, yeah, we are all one, right? So what I do to myself, what I do to others, I'm doing to me as well, and so on. So, of course, the best thing is to treat everyone kindly and so on. Yet we also have this thing that you just mentioned, that if it's just me experiencing myself in different perspectives and projections, why would me be against me? And I feel like this kind of feeling, it's complicated because I feel like I can't really grasp. I feel like it objectifies other people too much. I still believe that even though we're all one, each part have their own free will or part on it. Is like it's not like it's just me in another body. It's still a soul
Yeah.
in there who also have desires, who also have their own dreams, their own mission, their own uh, part in the game. And like it's a multiplayer game. It's not like a one gamer game.
Yeah. Yeah. I had I don't know, the very strong feeling recently that free will is really the only way we can heal, right? Like, we're coming from being fractured, and there's a pain in that, and there's a feeling of loss. And I think it was like a recording of Yogi Bhajan saying something like, "This is like, we won't accept God's love because we won't accept our parents' love."
Mm,
Like, this is the plight of man. If you could just accept God's love, you could be happy. But we're like, no, I feel, and it's this like these echoes of that fracturing where we're like, oh, I got rejected and I'm not loved. And so I was thinking about this, like, well, wouldn't it just, like, if God could be like an accordion player, and wouldn't it just be so easy to be like, whoop, and now everybody's back together and you're healed, right? And it's like, and we're one.
yeah.
But I think it's what's starting to coalesce for me is that the whole human journey is having the free will to accept the connection. Like, if the connection is something that happens to me, then I don't get to heal that part of me who still feels separated. But if
Mhm.
with free will as a, floating single cell out in the cosmos, I choose to accept that I am loved, and then I come back in that way, that heals it. And I was like, okay, that that makes complete sense because you think a lot, or I think a lot about like why all of this separation and why do we all have these like so intricate webs of trauma and past life experiences that have made us like really intensely complicatedly separated from one another. We're not just separated in simple ways. We're
Yes.
separated in these like we branch off in all these different patterns. It's like a neuron pattern, right? Where it's like you can't just follow one connection all the way through because everything is splintering and splintering and like branching in all these different ways. So, yeah, just needing to choose the acceptance.
I
Like
love
that's
that.
just like a reasonable human journey.
Yeah, if we could make the mission in our human journey as simple as just like, oh yeah, I had to have the forgetting and the free will to mess it up to eventually realize that it's just me, that I'm against me, and I get to reunite and like really just accept and surrender to that God loves me and that I get to have the experience that I want, and then it just gets lighter.
So, in that cosmology, every time I recognize I'm making an assumption, I just found a clue
Yeah.
because it's like I'm retracing my path of separation. So every time I come upon an assumption, every time I come upon a trigger, it's like I'm lifting up a stone and finding a clue underneath, and it's like, oh, okay, yes, this is a hurt, this is a wound I've been holding on to at the core of my being, and if I can create space around that, like, wow.
I feel like we hit a big thing here with why we get so caught up with these angers and so on as well. Because you mentioned self worth earlier. And if we make these little things and like just like as below as above, so as uh, is below and so on, it's the same reason why we get so caught up that we don't just surrender our things to God, because we feel so unworthy when we realize all the mm, things that we messed up. And that's the thing that keeps us from asking for forgiveness and really surrendering and like think, no, I'm just gonna figure this out and I'm gonna fight for it instead
I'm
of
gonna double down on being wrong.
I could just like, okay, forgive me, I love you, I know you love me, let's just reunite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, my big insight from today is definitely that seeing my assumptions, becoming aware of my assumptions is me finding the path back to oneness because these are all clues. These are
Yeah.
all clues. These are all clues for me to see the way I feel wounded and feel I'm unacceptable to God.
Yes.
So the more I can
Mm.
encounter the assumption and like put it in my pocket as a gemstone, the more I'm healing and the closer I'm moving back on that path to God.
Yeah.
That
Really?
feels that feels hella good.
That's right.
What's your big insight?
Yeah, I think there was many, but basically it's like, yeah, every relationship is just a reflection of our relationship to God in some
Mm.
way. And the fact that the doubt was the thing that makes us hold to anger instead of going with truth and trying to really like create the union, the solution, instead of surrender to the things to unfold, instead of trying to control everything. It's the same thing. it's exactly the same thing. If we have enough, this was a big thing for me because I was thinking, if I have enough trust, faith, if I really trust that everything is for me and not against me, I wouldn't have to be angry and trying to control things outside of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would just be like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I still like I just have such this vivid image in my mind of it was like a comedy show and there was an actor playing Buddha and he was sitting on a couch cross-legged playing the video game Grand Theft Auto, which I've never played, but I guess is pretty violent, right? Like you're stealing people's cars and beating them up and stuff. And like he's just he's just being Buddha. Like he's not playing with anger or vengeance or like all of those emotions that's supposed to stir up. He's just like, or judgment. It's just like, oh, isn't this an interesting facet of life? And I just like it's so brilliant because it's like if we have that acceptance, that faith that we are accepted, and we're just going through life like, oh, okay. And there's that. And there's that. Like then you can
Yeah.
you can look at things that are disturbing personally or in a larger way. And it's not that we don't want to take action. Like it's not like you walk by somebody who's drowning in a river and you're like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, pull them out of the river. Yeah, that's why we're here. But I love that possibility of relating to triggering situations in a way that's like, ah, okay. I'm not fighting against it. I'm not rejecting it. I'm not allowing it to become part of my story in a damaging way.
Yeah.
So my insight action, I would love to start writing down, like once I come out of the anger or the activation and become aware of what the assumption was, I just want to start writing those down. I want to start an assumption notebook. And I
Yeah.
kind of want to see how many I can come up with, right? Because I want to think about it from the point of view of not, oh man, I made another assumption. I'm projecting on people again. Da, da, da. I'm going to keep doing that. The newsflash, that's going to keep happening for as long as I'm alive as a human.
And
But
you get to be aware of one more assumption instead of
yes,
just letting it
yes,
run the show in the background.
yeah. Give me one more clue. Give me one more clue. Give me one more clue. I'm going to start an assumption notebook.
I love that. I'm gonna join you with this, and I want to add one thing to this. Whenever we discover an assumption, which is basically a limiting belief as well for all the coaches out there, uh,
Uh-huh.
we get to rewrite that. So, what is the new assumption that I want to put in place of it? Because it's easier to get rid of something, replacing by something positive instead of just like, oh, I don't want to feel that and putting the negative. Because when we put the negative, we just focus more on that.
Yeah.
So, what assumption can I put in place of it?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And to the
Ooh.
assumption that we had in here, like the everyone is against me, which was the big one that I think a lot of people probably can relate. What can we put in place of it? I'm feeling just like the I trust that everything is for me is a good replacement for that.
I aspire to that.
We are in the new moon. We get to plant that.
The
I'm gonna burn the last
moon
one.
in Gemini, even better.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah. Yesterday and today, I was like, "Oh, we got some doubled up Gemini energy. What am I
Mm.
doing to? What am I doing to really tap into my strengths at this time?" But I think this conversation, that's what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Yes.
Um,
You as a Gemini, you definitely. light it up with all the questions. Question all the assumptions. Wow.
Yeah, I gotta say my like getting outside pretty consistently after I eat lunch
Mm.
is opening up a lot more space for just thinking on things in a fruitful way, right? Breaking up the day, getting out, getting into the sunshine, and I'm like, "Oh, let's zoom out. What's the larger view?" And that's where I was when I was asking myself what assumptions have been making me unhappy or what of my unhappiness has been caused by assumptions this week.
Yes. Oh,
So,
great
yeah,
meditation.
yeah, I find that to be so helpful just to break up the like if I'm in the same place, I'm probably thinking the same thoughts. And if I get to a different physical space, especially in the sunshine, then I get to have different thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you for
That,
this conversation.
thank you. And for anyone watching, please let us know in the comments if you're going to create your assumption journal as well, and what other assumptions that you had, because maybe you sharing yours can help enlighten others from theirs as well.
Absolutely. Can't wait
So,
to hear from you.
yeah. Till next time, stay safe and check your assumptions.